Must be Monday.
It is.
The machine isn't awake yet. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Wenatchee Valley. Good morning, North Central Washington, and everybody out there watching this program on the World Wide Web. This is Wake Up Wenatchee Valley on this Monday, the 11th day of December, 2017. I'm Dan Kuntz alongside Steve Hare. Happy Monday.
Oh, happy Monday to you too, Dan. It's too early to wake up. What are you talking about? Look out there. It's still dark.
Well, that's the nature of the beast, and we still have, 10 more days of autumn before winter comes on Thursday the 21st, and that'll be the shortest day of the year, and then eventually we'll have longer days.
2 weeks Christmas.
Yeah.
Boy.
You ready? Did you get my present this weekend?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Not yet.
I anxiously waited for the guy from UPS to come by my door with probably a really big, heavy box full of toys and stuff for me from you, and it didn't happen.
What?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
No.
You must have had one of those porch pirates come by and rip it off.
That could very well be it. That could very well. Well, knowing our relationship and how much we respect each other's work ethic and as personal friends, I simply assume that whatever you're having shipped to my house is going to need a dolly and 2 or 3 people
Most
to carry
likely.
it.
That's right.
Because, my rule of thumb is always big and expensive. Big and expensive. Remember that if you're buying me a present. We got the weather forecast. We got a whole bunch of sports. You got a bunch of news to get to. And we're going to kind of breeze and kind of fly through this first segment of the program because the second half, my guest today will be local attorneys Gil Sparks and Scott Volan. And this was a seed that you planted in my direction about 12 days ago.
I thought it would be quite topical, this issue you're going to be discussing today.
Sexual harassment in the workplace. It is the topic du jour. There's no question about that. Steve mentioned that maybe having Gil and Scott on to give kind of a local perspective would be a good idea. I emailed Gil and Scott, and immediately, within minutes, they said we'd love to do the program, and so they're here. Looking
And they
forward to
also agreed to represent you.
In what?
Oh, well, we'll go there.
Yes, I've been indicted for being just too darn wonderful. That's the problem. Enough of this nonsense. We got a lot of stuff to get to on this Monday. Let's take you around North Central Washington with our Valley View cameras. And there, of course, is the Wenatchee Valley proper. It's not bad, Steve. But you remember last week, clouds and fog and clouds and fog. Guess what we have this week?
Same thing.
Clouds and fog and clouds and fog. The inversion layer is still there. The air stagnation advisory remains in effect until noon on Thursday. However, Steve, we could get a snowflake or 2 this weekend. Finally, this high pressure ridge, which has been dominating our weather and keeping all those pollutants and the bad air trapped near the valley floor, is going to start breaking up and moving away Thursday night into Friday.
So that high pressure ridge starting to weaken a little bit then.
Starting to weaken a little bit, but for the vast majority of this week, at least through Thursday, it's going to be what we've had for quite some time. So there's Wenatchee. Good morning, Wenatchee. Thanks for joining us. Camera 2, we find out together, Steve, because we don't know. That's either
Looking
Cougar
down
Ridge,
off
pull
of Badger
back.
Mountain.
That's Cougar Ridge.
Cougar.
Yep, that's Cougar Ridge. You can see the Ottobashian Bridge there, the Old Station Industrial Area, Sunny Slope, the Stemilk Complex.
And the Cascades in the background there.
Cascades in the background, which, by the way, is not going to have any snow at all until we get to the weekend as well, as you might imagine. Camera 3. Good morning, Lake Chelan.
Wow,
you can see the brand new Sunset Marina right in the middle of your screen. You can see the Three Fingers Complex and the beautiful town of Chelan itself. And you can see exactly where the snow line is, can't you? Isn't that kind of cool? So good morning, Chelan. Thanks for joining us on this Monday.
See that layer of clouds over the top?
Yep, and it'll be there as well. And finally, number 4. And that's Billy Goat.
Above the clouds.
That's got to be Billy Goat.
That's
That
Billy
is
Goat.
Billy Goat. Look at that. It's like you're flying in an airplane.
Isn't that beautiful?
That's up there a ways. So what you can't see is Pateros, the Columbia River, the Methow River. Brewster would normally be within eyesight of this particular camera, what we affectionately call Billy Goat Ridge camera. This camera is way up there in elevation. So all you see is clouds and the sun coming up. That is an incredible view. Let's just look at that all day and 86 the rest of the show.
It's quite a blanket of clouds.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. 4 minutes after the hour, your forecast from the National Weather Service. Clouds today, clouds tonight, clouds Tuesday night. Wednesday, Steve, clouds. Wednesday night, though, the clouds will be persisting, and then by the time we get to Thursday, we'll have clouds rolling in, Steve. Look at the highs and the lows. Look at that. Just real quickly. There's nothing I can comment on that.
No.
1, 2, maybe 3 degree temperature variation, and that's it.
And I look at those temperatures for later in the work week. You were saying a chance of some flurries, but looking at the temperatures, it might be kind of a mix.
It would be overnight flurries that would disappear and change into rain. Thursday night is when the high pressure ridge will begin to exit the area. So by the time we get to Friday, we do have a slight chance of rain. But the nice thing about Friday, Steve, you see that yellow thing on that graphic? That's called the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be partly sunny on Friday, which is nice. Then we go right back to the clouds, as you can see on Saturday and Sunday, but considerably warmer temperatures and a rain-snow mix possible, about a 50-50 chance there. And again, the air stagnation advisory is in effect until noon on Thursday. That's when it is due to expire, and my guess is it probably will. So, because as that system comes in. So there you go. You're gonna have to deal with the blucky stuff until Thursday, and then Thursday night while you're sleeping, it's going to start changing. A little bit of sunshine on Friday, and a mixture of rain and light snow possible over the weekend with warmer temperatures. As far as the mountain passes are concerned, you got nothing to worry about. Roadways bare and dry on all of them. I-90 looking good. No advisories, no restrictions. A bit windy at the summit of I-90, especially on the west side. So if you're driving a high-profile rig, you're going to get moved around. It looks like it's snowing on Stevens. It isn't. That's just fog. Again, you will find visibility issues as you drive into the mountain passes. You hit the fog and you hit the clouds, and hopefully you have your headlights on anyway, but that's the only real thing to worry about there. Some pretty poor visibility at times on Stevens, and you'll find a little bit of some patchy frost and ice on Blewett Pass, but again, no real problems. No snow, no precipitation at all in the mountain passes until Friday. They are going to get some snow Friday night, and into Saturday. And regardless of how much snow they get Friday night and Saturday night it switches over to rain. And on Saturday night, Steve, in the mountain passes, they are expecting heavy rain.
So still a little iffy on whether we're going to have a white Christmas then.
It's just too far out. It's just too far out. I could go out on a limb and guarantee it. And then on December 26th, there would be ugly Facebook posts about how I guaranteed a white Christmas, and it didn't happen. So there you go. Remember last year, December of 2016, of the 31 days in December, we had snow on 16 of those days. So we got lucky. You know, we had a white Christmas, and it was beautiful. I don't know about this year. It hasn't happened yet. 7 minutes after the hour on this Monday edition of Wake Up Wenatchee Valley. A lot happened over the weekend. If you were out and about over the weekend, we hope you took us along because we're portable. You can stream us right on your phone. But if you just did other things and you don't really know what happened over the weekend, that's why we have this guy here. In 1 minute, your Monday morning news on Wake Up Wenatchee Valley. We're live, by the way, from Studio 9 in downtown Wenatchee on the NCW Live channel.
And now it's time for your local news update with Steve Hare.
Good morning and welcome back to Wake Up Wenatchee Valley. Bear with us, folks, as we get through these technical difficulties. Here's what's happening in north central Washington news on this Monday morning. First of all, a 55-year-old Soap Lake man was hospitalized after being injured Friday evening by a pipe bomb he was building in his home. Neighbors near the 100 block of Adrian Avenue Northwest in Lakeview called deputies around 6 in the evening to complain about the sound of fireworks. As deputies were investigating, the staff at Ephrata's Columbia Basin Hospital called, reporting that a man had been driven to the emergency room suffering from a blast injury and shrapnel wounds to his right hand and arm. Deputies learned the man had been building and handling a pipe bomb inside his home, again on Adrian Avenue Northwest. When it detonated, the man was later flown to a Spokane hospital for treatment. His condition at this time is unknown. Also, Douglas County Sheriff Harvey Jesdahl credits Bridgeport deputies with using remarkable restraint early Sunday morning when dealing with two suspects in a stolen vehicle. It happened when a deputy pursued a recklessly driven vehicle into the Douglas County PUD parking lot. When the patrol vehicle pulled up behind the vehicle, it was put into reverse and rammed the deputy's car, then sped off. Chase continued until the suspect car had a flat tire and then was forced off the road. Meanwhile, the female suspect, identified as 24-year-old Yvonne Lopez Flores of Bridgeport, resisted arrest but is now in custody. A 20-year-old passenger, identified as Christopher Rodriguez, also from Bridgeport, was arrested on an outstanding Department of Corrections warrant. A prominent Douglas County wheat-growing family has been sentenced to federal probation after pleading guilty to charges of illegal sale of firearms. Mary and Terry Hunt and their two sons, Rusty and Derek, were sentenced in federal court last week following an investigation that started in 2015 by the Federal Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Mary Hunt, who was a former Douglas County Commissioner, Her husband and 2 sons were each sentenced to 5 years probation. The family has also been ordered to forfeit guns that were seized in connection with that case. Meanwhile, it may be time to roll up your sleeve and get vaccinated. The latest flu surveillance report from the Washington State Department of Health indicates there are 4 lab-confirmed deaths in Washington and 7 flu outbreaks in long-term care facilities around this season. Chelan Douglas Health District officials say a few local cases have been reported. Flu shots take at least 2 weeks from the date of vaccination for most people to generate the vaccine-induced immunity to the flu. Eastmont School Board scheduled to consider a name change for Robert E. Lee Elementary School when it meets later today. Some district residents have requested dropping the name due to its links to the Confederacy and perceived racist connotations. Superintendent Garn Christensen will reportedly recommend changing the name of the school to simply Lee Elementary. The board is also set to discuss possible changes to the district's facility naming policies, but no action was expected there. Today's meeting starts at 5:30 at Kenroy Elementary School. Eric Granstrom spent part of his weekend covering the Les Schwab Toy Drive. Saturday's activities included building bicycles. Here's his story.
Over 30 people showed up Sunday morning at Sangster Motors for the bike build. Chad Sangster says why they got involved.
Les Schwab, is a big part of the community and what they do. And Kirk actually came to us and told us what he was wanting to do for this. And we're like, absolutely, we're on board. Anything that Kirk's going to head up, we'll be involved with for sure. So.
Well, it's one thing to offer out. I know you guys donated $2,000, but to open up your shop to do the bike build and be extra involved, it must have touched you guys somehow as a family to want to do a little bit more.
Well, I think this time of year, we're kind of like Kirk. This time of year, we want to see kids that don't get an opportunity to have something. That's really what's important.
It's been pretty nice of what Sangsters has done and contributed to this whole event. They've given a $2,000 cash donation. They've opened up their shop to put over 110 bikes together. It's been very, very impressive.
Wenatchee Valley Velos stepped up to make sure each child who receives a bike stays safe.
I went to the board of directors. We jumped all over it. And Evan Plews from Ridge Cycle Sports contacted Cali Bike Helmets down there in California, and they said, hey, we'll make you a hell of a deal on these. And away we go. So each child, each kid, when they open up a bike on Christmas morning, will get a helmet that will fit them, will protect them. They can go out there and keep themselves safe.
100 bicycles, 10 scooters, certainly going to make sure children in our valley have a Merry Christmas. With NCW Life Channel News, I'm Eric Granstrom.
Thank you, Sangster Motors!
Great project. Finally, the community of Bridgeport said goodbye last week to a longtime sheriff's deputy. A celebration was held at the City Council in Bridgeport for Deputy Gary Cooper. Cooper's hanging up his badge after serving for 32 years on the force. We wanted to close out this morning's news by sharing Deputy Cooper's final radio call.
DL-14 Rivercom.
DL-14, go ahead.
I'll be officially out of service. Thanks for everything.
Deputy Gary Cooper on behalf of the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, Rivercom Dispatch, and the citizens of Douglas County, we thank you for your 32 and a half years of service. We have served your community with honor, pride, courage, and integrity, the cornerstone elements to our profession. We have laughed, cried, fought, bled, suffered, and loved with your partners in blue. It is a privilege that today we announce your tour has concluded. Let us, your brothers and sisters, continue to carry on that tradition of service. Good night, good luck, and may peace be with you. DO-14 is out of service. 11-10.
That was pretty good.
Congratulations to retiring Douglas County Sheriff's Deputy Gary Cooper. Thanks a lot for your service, Gary.
Great story. Good
Great
stuff.
story, yeah.
The news with Grant Olson comes your way at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 10 o'clock Monday through Friday, our evening newscast. Grant Olson in the anchor chair, and at the bottom of your screen are the various ways you can get a hold of us via Facebook. You can email us, you can call us, send us a letter if you want. We're at 201 South Chelan here in downtown Wenatchee. Steve, you're a busy guy. Make sure Scott and Gil have everything they need in the green room and tell them we'll
You
get them
betcha.
on the air here in about 10 minutes. 21 minutes after the hour, sports and everything else you're used to on this Monday edition of Wake Up Wenatchee Valley when we come back on the NCW Live channel.
I think he was the second.
And welcome back to this
First,
Monday
second.
edition of Wake Up Wenatchee Valley. And at 23 minutes after the hour, sports. The Les Schwab Prep Scoreboard from Friday. The scene was Eastmont High School's gymnasium when Wenatchee and Eastmont met in the Litterbox game at Eastmont High School. Eric Grandstrom and Grant Olson had the call on the NCW Live channel. Here are your highlights.
The ponytail wagon behind Allie Hallberg. She'll stop and pop from the corner. It's good. Woo! Goes left side with it to O'Rourke. Now to Vaughn. Inside turnaround shot for good by DeFore. Now a lob pass out front to Simpson. She's a 1-on-3. Shoots it from 15. But there's DeFore. Offensive rebound. Put back foul. And she'll get the and one. Allie brings it up the far sideline. Stops, feeds over to Sugg. Gets it back. Going to shoot the long three-pointer. Good. And she's fouled. Count the bucket. And one. Feeds across over to Cox outside. Here's a long three. Good. No, two-pointer by DeFore. Shows a little range there, Grant Olson.
Yes.
With two, with one. Eastmont's going to celebrate as the Wildcats beat the Panthers in our first game here tonight, 61-52.
Emily DeFore leading the Wildcats with 17 points. Allie Hallberg 24 for Wenatchee. The Wildcats snapping a 9-game Panther winning streak in the series. Also Friday on the Les Schwab Prep Scoreboard. As you can see, Okanagan over Chelan. Cashmere fall on the road to Zilla despite 34 points from Haley Van Lith. And finally to boys. Again, this is Friday. The Les Schwab boys basketball scoreboard. Wenatchee Panthers' Darius Carlson started strong, scored Wenatchee's first 8 points. Panthers cruised to an easy victory over the Wildcats. Grant Olson and Eric Grandstrom had the call right here on the NCW Live channel.
Top of the key, spins around, now drives to the basket, fakes to the wing, puts it up off the glass and good. Across the timeline to Riggin, right side, behind the back dribble into the key, nice shovel pass, Carlson underneath, it's up and good. Left elbow inside Carlson, triple team there, Carlson just jumps over everybody, up and in. Kuski now near side, Garrett Smith with Carlson all over him. Smith's gonna take it to the basket, nicely done, up and good.
Wow. The big fella with the big move.
Cooper can't do anything with it, kicks it back out to Riggin, who's gonna drive, a layup is good.
Cass Riggin is a step above everybody else on the floor right now.
Eric, you said it. Hansen back to top of the key. Into the ball game is Jacob Seal, a 6'2 senior. There's Riggin, fall away, good. Underneath the shot, taken, no good, put back, up and in by Vanderpool is good, and he will score 3 points tonight, and that's the ball game.
Also on Friday, Zilla beat Cashmere. Okanagan chewed up Chelan, Tenasket over Manson. All of those scores were from Friday. Now Saturday on the Les Schwab Prep Scoreboard, Ferris all over the Wenatchee Panthers in boys basketball, 78-31. Eastmont got the better of Meade. Cashmere victorious. Antioch victorious as well. Manson over Waterville Mansfield. On the girls' slate from Saturday, Wenatchee rebounded from their Eastmont loss on Friday to beat Ferris on Saturday. Antioch over Chelan. Cashmere girls defeated LaSalle, and Omak opted for the win over Cascade, as you see there. Other prep action on Saturday. Again, the Les Schwab Prep Scoreboard. Eastmont wins the Tower Classic and girls bowling over the weekend. Nicely done, Lady Wildcats. The Eastmont boys finished third at the Inland Empire Tournament. And in boys swimming and diving, Wenatchee finishes first at the Walla Walla Invite on Saturday. Wenatchee Wild 1-1. Over the weekend, they fell behind early. On Friday, they scored 5 unanswered goals. They ended up beating Merritt 7-4 last night. Wenatchee lost to the Prince George Spruce Kings. The final there was 4-3. Wenatchee will host Salmon Arm this Friday and Saturday at the Town Toyota Center. The less we say about the Seahawks game yesterday, the better. Jacksonville Seahawks. It was an ugly game, and it ended even uglier. There was a lot of bad things going on in the end, especially when Quentin Jefferson tried to go into the stands. It was not very pretty. In any event, Jacksonville over the Seahawks, despite a late comeback effort by Seattle, 30-24. Thankfully, though, Seattle is still just a game behind LA in the NFC West because the Rams lost to Philly. 43-35 in a shootout. LA is 9-4. Seahawks are 8-5. The Seahawks will host the Rams this Sunday. That's sports at 28 minutes after the hour. The obscure holiday of the day today. Imagine if every mountain in the world disappeared. That would be strange, wouldn't it? Let's appreciate mountains today. Today is International Mountain Day. It's a UN-sanctioned event to talk about the importance of mountains. And they are important. They are nation's skyscrapers. So take a chance today, and because we live in a mountainous region, to take a look-see at all the beautiful mountains that we get to enjoy here in the Pacific Northwest. Just be glad you don't live in, say, Kansas or East Texas, where they don't have mountains. It is International Mountain Day. Today in history, a couple of events. First of all, whenever there's a state that joined the Union, we like to welcome them. And Indiana is 201 years old today. Isn't that one of the best state flags? Indiana didn't even have a state flag for its first 100 years. They were the only state that didn't have a state flag. And finally, during their centennial of 100 years ago, they went, shouldn't we have a flag? They thought about it. Of course, Indiana is the Hoosier state. What is a Hoosier? A Hoosier is somebody from Indiana. Nobody really knows where the term came from. Indiana's motto, the crossroads of America. And Indiana, God bless them for this, they only have 12 official state symbols. You know, the state bird and the state wildflower and the state animal, all that stuff. A lot of states have 60 or 70 of those symbols. Indiana only has 12, which is just about right. Happy birthday, Indiana. Joined the Union on this date 201 years ago. And 76 years ago, December 11th, 1941, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had a problem. It was the Japanese who attacked the United States. The United States declared war on Japan, but he well knew that the problem wasn't in the Far East. The problem was Nazi Germany and Europe. We got to fight those guys first. That's got to be a priority. How do we tell Americans that? How do we declare war on Germany? They didn't attack us. Oh, wait a minute. Adolf Hitler beat us to the punch. Yes, Germany declared war on the United States on this date 76 years ago. In turn, of course, we declared war on Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. So Franklin D. Roosevelt didn't have to worry about it. Adolf Hitler beat him to the punch. Germany declared war on the United States and vice versa on this date 76 years ago. A couple of birthdays to get along to you on this December 11th. Fiorello LaGuardia, the mayor of New York City from 1934 to 1945, just 5 foot 2 inches tall, but he was a dynamo. He was the original Rhino, Republican in name only. He was big into public housing and public transit and public parks, law enforcement. He and FDR, a liberal Democrat, were great friends. In a 1993 poll of historians to rank the greatest mayors in American history, Fiorello LaGuardia came out number 1. They say that he was the best mayor in American history, and he was the mayor for New York City for 12 years during a remarkable time in that city's progress. And happy birthday to Tim Southey. Whenever we think about cricketers from New England, the great cricket players from New Zealand, we always think of Tim Southey. He's known for his ability to generate late outswing at a brisk pace. I don't know what that means. Tim Southey, a cricketer from New Zealand, is 29 years old today. 31 minutes after the hour. Throughout the course of the holiday season, we are inviting our viewers to shop local and go to some of the more tradition-bound businesses in North Central Washington. Most of these businesses have been around for years and years and years, and the owners are there every day talking about their product, expert knowledge of their product. No exception to this one, Kris Kringle on Front Street. In Leavenworth, of course, it's Christmas all year round at Kris Kringle. December 17th, coming up in just a few days. Stop by Kris Kringle between 1 and 3 p.m. and meet Emmanuel Fontanini. He's going to sign nativity pieces. It's really cool stuff. Anytime at Kris Kringle, you immediately get into the Christmas spirit. Beautiful ornaments, one-of-a-kind ornaments. Kris Kringle has the largest selection of Department 56, by the way, in Central Washington. Kris Kringle, it's Christmas year-round. Kris Kringle, downtown Leavenworth. When you're in the Bavarian Village, stop by. Most people do. And finally, we want to mention the Les Schwab Community Toy Drive, of course, because you people have been going great guns. We love you folks because you're out there, you're doing it. It's one thing for us to say buy a new unwrapped toy and drop it off at Les Schwab in Wenatchee or East Wenatchee or our studios or Country 104.7 or the Wenatchee World or Sangster Motors or Works or Columbia Valley Community Health or Hooked on Toys. And you're doing it. We're filling up those boxes and we've got a bunch of rooms in our offices that we're getting all of the gifts where they're supposed to be and the beneficiaries of that. It's still doing great. Keep up the good work. Keep going. Every kid in the Wenatchee Valley should have multiple brand new unwrapped toys under the Christmas tree on Christmas morning. The Les Schwab Community Toy Drive. Go to their Facebook page. It's going to answer any questions you may have. 33 minutes after the hour, because of some technical difficulties, we will be unable, to bring to you Everyone is Entitled to Mike McKnighty's Opinion. We apologize for that. We'll have it back tomorrow, we hope. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Gil Sparks and Scott Voland, sexual harassment, a very serious and sobering topic. When we come back, you're watching Wake Up Wenatchee Valley on the NCW Life channel. "36 minutes after the hour on this Monday edition of Wake Up Wenatchee Valley." It is the topic of discussion anywhere you go, any place. It started out little by little by little, and now it has become a groundswell. It's not only the Me Too movement I'm speaking of, but sexual harassment in the workplace is an incredibly hot topic right now, and we thought it'd be a good idea to bring in two of the more prominent practitioners of law in the Wenatchee Valley to come in and talk about that from both a local aspect and, well, we'll just let the conversation just sort of organically happen. To my immediate left from Ogden Murphy Wallace is our good friend Gil Sparks, and to my far left is Scott Voland from the Voland Law Firm. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dan.
Let's just start out, what is going on here? This seemed to have came out of nowhere. Started with Harvey Weinstein, maybe even before that with Bill O'Reilly and Roger Ailes, the former chairman of Fox, and now it's everywhere. Did you see this coming? What's going on?
Well, my viewpoint, and Scott may have a different perspective, but this is not new. This has been around for some time. Came out of some court cases 20, 30 years ago. The legal community has been training the business community and others on appropriate behavior in the workplace for a long time. What I think we are seeing is a phenomena of social media and the safety some people feel they have by putting something on social media that says, I experienced this kind of conduct too. And that's just taken off.
It may be even broader than that. When we think about historical changes, societal changes in our country, perhaps we've reached a tipping point, to steal a phrase from Malcolm Gladwell and others, where today women who have experienced this kind of treatment in the workplace ever since their presence was established, now believe and are encouraged that they're at the point that in reporting these incidents, it will not result in recrimination for them. It will allow them to continue their career arc, that there is a remedy for them in the court. Perhaps in years past and decades past, the belief was those routes weren't truly available. And so to speak out would result in a loss of position, perhaps a permanent loss of position, as well as a reputational loss in their community.
What is there is a legal definition, I suppose, of workplace sexual harassment. Can you give us a thumbnail idea of what it is? I mean, what is and what is not sexual harassment in the workplace, in the profession, in the office?
Go ahead, Gil.
Well, there is certainly a legal definition, and trying to break that down, it is generally unwelcome conduct that affects the terms and conditions of employment, that is attributable to the employer and is severe or pervasive. And you have all those elements that constitute sexual harassment.
And to tag on to what Gil is saying, there really are two classic forms of sexual harassment in the workplace. One is a quid pro quo or exchange relationship where sexual acts are exchanged for a continued economic or employment position, or the opportunity of promotion, or the absence or risk of demotion. That is perhaps less prominent than an offensive environment form of sexual harassment, where the extreme conduct, although not sexualized and physical contact is so extreme that a person can no longer work productively in that environment.
Both of you have extensive backgrounds in this particular topic. Has both of your phones been ringing off the hook? Scott, Gil, can you come down and talk to my people, my managers, and they need a refresher course because of what's going on? Has that been happening with you guys?
For my part, it's not so much the phone as the request from the business community to provide trainings, updated trainings, education, so they can help create a culture to preclude this kind of conduct from happening. That's where I've seen the uptick.
Scott?
Well, it's interesting because Gil and I are sort of on separate sides of the V, if you will. Gil's extremely valuable work is in helping organizations train and understand these issues so that they can prevent occurrences. I'm a plaintiff's trial lawyer, and so what happens on my side of the V is I receive calls and contacts from folks saying, this is what I'm suffering in the workplace, what are my remedies, what can I do? And obviously those answers are different based upon where that person's employed, the nature and power position they enjoy in the workplace. And we live in a relatively small community or small communities in north central Washington. When a person makes a decision to bring a cause of action in court against their employer or former employer for sexual harassment, there is a fear, and that's a rational, reasonable fear, that they'll no longer be employed, that other potential employers won't hire them because they now have a record of having stepped forward and said that conduct was wrong.
How much does timing play a role in all of a sudden the groundswell of interest and knowledge of what's going on? And people say, I had a job 4 years ago, or I had a job 10 years ago and 9 jobs ago, and I was sexually harassed. I didn't do anything about it. Now I can go after him. Is there a statute of limitations? Where does that all fit in? I'll have you address that, Scott.
There is a statute of limitations, generally 3 years in the state of Washington. I think Gil would concur with that. The federal law is slightly different, and in addition, when you have a course of conduct over time, if the conduct is pervasive and continuous, you may be able to bootstrap earlier than the expiration of the 3-year term, but that's relatively rare. In addition, if an employer or someone in a superior position engages in physical contact with a subordinate, in addition to that perhaps being sexual harassment, there are also torts such as assault and battery, which have shorter statute of limitations, but also may apply to that physical contact.
So Gil, from your standpoint, somebody goes into their HR department, closes the door and said, I think I'm being sexually harassed. What do you advise your clients or your HR people to do at that point?
Well, at that point, I have them sit down and try to ascertain as many facts as they possibly can. And then depending on what they determine, really drives the next step. There's going to be there's going to be a need for an investigation, and they can either choose to do it internally if they are skilled enough. Oftentimes it's better to have an independent external investigation. If it's determined it's a credible claim, then the legal obligation is to put an immediate and unequivocal stop to the inappropriate and offensive conduct. And failure to do that will create liability for the employer. But before any of that, the person that came into the HR department, hopefully the organization had a policy prohibiting the inappropriate conduct. Without a policy, the liability possibilities escalate for the organization.
What about a third party? Say you're just having a coffee clutch. Patty and Janet are sitting there talking, and Patty says, "Janet, I don't think the way Bill's treating you is appropriate." And Janet says, "Oh, I don't mind. It's okay. But I don't think so." Does that pop up? A third party saying, I think this is wrong, even though the person who may be being sexually harassed doesn't really think she is?
Well, I think any conversation like that is generally replete with informal legal opinions. They may or may not necessarily be accurate. So reporting to a third party doesn't necessarily begin a process. The employer's then not heard about the environmental issue, and so I don't know at that point whether or not they would be responding. Also, I have to say that the courts have for decades now observed, I think rightly, that the employment atmosphere is not a Sunday school atmosphere. And so the isolated incident, which is not extreme or severe, is generally not going to give rise to a successful sexual harassment claim. I think Gil's used the word pervasive. I think pervasiveness is an important element, that there's a continuity that the employee can't avoid, that they're being, if you will, victimized in that process. I think that is more likely, more often characterizes the successful sexual harassment claim in our court system.
You're dealing with two separate sets of laws. You're dealing with the Revised Code of Washington, and then you're dealing with federal law as well, both dealing with the same subject. Are there conflicts? Are the laws okay as they are now? Do they need to be tweaked? Is everybody readdressing what's already on the books?
Interesting philosophical question. I think the laws are adequate. The issue that I think needs to be addressed is convincing employers across the board to take this seriously and ensure that they create a culture in their workplaces that is respectful and does not transgress these inappropriate types of things. Oftentimes, problems arise because the employer will set the policy, will bring a trainer in, will do the training, but then just does not walk the talk. And as soon as that's seen, the examples aren't made, people transgress into inappropriate behavior, problems come up.
And also in direct response to that is an interesting philosophical question. Congress will and has enacted its own laws on this issue, Title VII in particular and others, and so as Congress defines harassment, then those cases which are found in our federal courts or state courts employing that law will interpret a violation or the absence of a violation based upon prior cases. That's the precedent system, stare decisis system that our courts observe at the state and federal level. Our state law is often different state by state on this and every other issue. I think perhaps the classic example is Article 1, Section 8 of our state constitution has a broader understanding of privacy than does the federal constitution in its amendments. So as it regards police activity, for example, what is a private affair in Washington state is more protected for the citizen than the application of the federal constitution. So we see that same analogy take place between federal laws on sexual harassment and an individual state's law on sexual harassment.
Which brings up my next question. Gil, I'll address this to you. Should every employer, every business, regardless of their size, have a written policy on sexual harassment? I'll throw you an example. I'm Joe Smith, and I'm a general contractor, and I got 6 employees, and they're all guys. So I don't have to worry about that. I don't need to have a policy. Or is that a fallacy?
I would tell that organization it's a fallacy. Now, Washington state law says it prohibits discrimination, which includes sexual discrimination for employers with 8 or more employees. However, our courts have come around that employee threshold by arguing that sexual harassment is a violation of public policy, so a very creative plaintiff's attorney, like Scott, can get around the 8 employee threshold. Now, sexual harassment is just not man, woman. It can be the same gender, and we often see those kind of cases. So it's important for even the small employers to know to have a policy, know the rules, instruct their employees to abide by those rules, and if not, to take the appropriate consequences to change the culture in the workplace.
And I think these 40 or 50 cases that we've seen reported recently in the news, they almost without exception deal with physical contact or the imminence of physical contact. When we're talking about offensive environment, however, then that encompasses communication. So as Gil and I were talking off camera, email and social network comments, and there's so many places in which an employer can pervasively communicate in an offensive way that falls within a rubric of sexual harassment. A modern example today would be the number of transgender individuals in the workplace. That population is growing. So comments about that, jokes, email about that of a pervasive and consistent nature, no matter the fact that they all may be within that workplace of one gender presently, that still presents a problem.
We mentioned earlier as an example, sleep with me or you're fired, and so the person succumbs to the pressures to keep their job trajectory going, as opposed to I'm leaning over your desk and I touched your back as I point out a thing and then I walked away. That's a big boat from one side of it to the other. How do you deal with that? I mean, first of all, does it affect the statute of limitations on that first example that I gave you? You know, I wouldn't have my job today if I didn't sleep with my supervisor 5 years ago, but I had to sleep with them. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think we need to also understand that intimate relationships spark and occur within the workplace. Folks meet their life partner in the workplace. In fact, they're more likely to meet them there. They're having more contact with folks every day than in any other environment. So, you know, and so there's nothing wrong with forming a relationship which becomes an intimate relationship in the workplace. It's the disparate power positions that make it so problematic, because there's an implication that if the relationship ends, the person in a subordinate position, male or female, will be penalized by the termination of that relationship. So yes, there's a gulf between a sexualized relationship in the workplace that's a condition of continued employment and someone patting someone on the shoulder or something. However, that patting on the shoulder of a pervasiveness, hugging, and too much closeness, physical closeness, begins to intimidate that subordinate. So over time, that can equal a sexual harassment case. On an individual, one-time event where I touch my subordinate on the shoulder, that's not sexual harassment. But what it is an expression of physical dominance over time, and it becomes an implied condition of continued employment, that's problematic.
The difference between, I'm sorry, Gil, did you have something to add?
All I was going to add is another aspect of this is where there's the supervisor-subordinate relationship that starts out consensual and then deteriorates into a non-consensual relationship. And then the subordinate makes the statement, I got into that relationship because I had to keep my job. Right. And how do you sort out whether that was true or not? That creates a very difficult analysis.
It'd be almost impossible to, I'm spitballing here, but stay with me because Scott kind of got there. You met somebody at the office, you like each other, there's an attraction, you date, it works out great, and then it doesn't work out great, and you break up, but you're still working together, and then does the female say, I was sexually harassed even though I was in a mutual relationship? Is it open season on guys when that happens? Because it's happened.
Well, I don't know that it's, I've handled cases from a plaintiff's perspective where the superior position was occupied by men and women in different cases. And so the gender is immaterial in my mind. It's a credibility question. Ultimately, 12 people plus an alternate as a jury, if the case ever gets to that point at trial, which is statistically improbable.
Right. As is almost all cases now.
Certainly, but I think there was a study over the weekend that suggested that in the area of sexual harassment, about 1% of the time there is a plaintiff's verdict in favor of the employee, the former employee. Now, about 50% of that total 100% are cases that are resolved. And so we don't know in the general community those facts because often a resolution or settlement is based upon a confidentiality non-disclosure agreement. And so we don't know as a public. But when cases get ultimately to trial, then it's a question of the credibility of those witnesses and who do the jurors believe. And statistically speaking, the employer stands a good chance of prevailing.
What's the difference between bringing charges from a civil or criminal charges in the area of sexual harassment in the workplace? Can you be charged criminally? Can the prosecutor charge you for sexual harassment in the workplace, or does it have to be a civil suit?
By and large, most of them are civil. As Scott talked about earlier, you can have other torts where you have touching involved. You can have assault and battery, which are criminal charges. But I'm not familiar with a criminal charge that's just sexual harassment. That's a civil.
Mm-hmm. Well, which brings up another thing. What's the difference between a private sector and public sector in sexual harassment as far as the process is concerned? I work for the Department of Licensing, and my boss, I think, is sexually harassing me, but I'm a government employee. Is that an entirely different realm, or is it pretty much the same thing?
The legal standards are the same. The way in which you enter into the process technically from a legal standpoint is different. Whenever an action's brought against a government employer or a government entity, no matter what the tort action is, the government must be informed through what's called a notice of claim. Mm-hmm. And so they are informed that a potential case is going to come forward. And there's a time period built in by statute. I think that the theoretical or the hope legislatively many decades ago was that this would give the parties an opportunity to resolve the differences. It rarely happens like that. In addition, the EEOC may investigate, may be required to investigate in order to determine whether or not they believe that there was wrongful conduct in the workplace. So there are some additional wrinkles. Ultimately, the same laws apply to the government as they do to private employers in the area of sexual harassment.
One last question for both of you. I'll do this one with Scott from your side of the coin. Hello, Mr. Volan. My name is Jane Doe, and I think I'm being sexually harassed in the workplace. What do I do now? What do they need to know before they come and sit down with you? What do they need to bring with them? That kind of stuff.
Like any other fact-finding process, what evidence or material exists, what third parties or witnesses may be available, what information demonstrates that there is in fact the presence or potential presence of sexual harassment beyond a person simply saying so. Ultimately, an individual simply saying so is in a remarkably weak position legally. And there is a burden of proof. And if that burden of proof is not met, as I tell many people, the truth has very little to do with what we're doing legally. What we're doing, and that may be fortunate or unfortunate, but that's a reality. What we're dealing with is the quality of admissible evidence. And is there evidence to support the contention?
Gil, I'll ask you a question from your line of work. We got a couple minutes left. Mr. Sparks, we have a problem here at the office, and I think it's beyond HR's control. What then?
What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to see what they have for a policy, what they have for documentation of who's talked to whom in what sequence. Had the individual brought this up to somebody in a position of authority so the employer was aware of it, and if so, how far ahead of time were they aware of it? Are there other individuals there? I'm going to want to know if anybody has social media evidence. We're seeing a lot of information show up on text message exchanges, which can be very either helpful or damaging depending on the circumstances. So we're exploring the social media platforms and how those have been used. And it's a whole new ballgame in that arena.
Yeah, there's a whole new, that's the biggest thing, right? This is unexplored territory when we talk about sexual harassment in social media. You got to be careful what you put on your Facebook post, don't you? You just have to think 5 times and vet it and all that other stuff.
There is no privacy.
There's no privacy. No, there is absolutely no privacy. And as Scott mentioned, if it comes down to basically a he said, she said scenario, that's an impossible wall, almost impossible wall to climb, isn't it?
It's difficult to get to trial because the court at some point acts in this fact-finding role. Before the court is going to hand over the assessment of credibility to a jury, the court needs to determine should this case proceed to trial. And if there are insufficient facts for the plaintiff, in most cases it's a motion essentially to dismiss called a motion for summary judgment. And if the court feels like there just is not enough quality or credible evidence to bring in a jury and have them assess credibility, then the case is terminated at that point. The plaintiff bears the burden. And the plaintiff must prove their case by a preponderance of the evidence. And if they fail to do so and don't have evidence suggestive of prevailing as a preponderance ultimately at trial, the case is never going to see the courtroom at trial.
We could keep talking about this, but unfortunately we are out of time. Scott Volan, thank you for dropping by. Gil Sparks, as always, it's good to see you. Everybody have a good Monday. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.